All right, Matthew's calling back. Our repeat caller, Matthew him from Ohio, wants to talk about the Trump presidency and how it will affect us. So, hello, Matthew. Welcome back. What's up?
Hey, Luxander. Hey, Ben. It's been a while. How are you guys?
Doing pretty okay
For
so
sure.
far today. No major complaints.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I know you saw my question in the queue. Basically, I just want to know personally and specifically, how would a Trump presidency affect either of you?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. And the way that it affects me actually affects you, and it affects a lot of people in this country. So it kind of makes me angry a little bit to see this question because I don't know if you're aware, I'm in the military. I'm a physician in the military, and I don't know if you're aware of the situation with how understaffed our military is, especially medically. We don't have a lot of physicians in the military. They've been working very hard over the past like decade to get more physicians to join, and they will incentivize a lot of physicians to join, and there's scholarships to get med students to give time to the military in order to keep them. And we know that if we're heading into situations globally, we need a force. We also need a force for homeland defense. And if you have your soldiers out there and they all die, that's a problem. Like, physicians are a force multiplier. If you want a strong military, you need to have good physicians, like with those units. And so, if we
I
have
appreciate.
trans people kicked, no, but I don't know if you understand where I'm going with this. If we have physicians getting kicked out of the military because they're trans, which is something that is not an issue related to deployment, um, you're going to lose a lot of your military power, and that's kind of scary. So
Okay,
Did you want to
and I
jump in
hear
and
what you're
respond to that,
saying. And I
Matthew?
please.
what was that, Matt?
No, I was sorry. There was just a gap. I was giving Matthew the opportunity to respond to you because I have obviously a different set of concerns.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's kind of where I'm going, Ben. And I understand where you're coming from, and I understand this how that affects you personally because you're in the military and you're a trans person and all that. So basic, and I get that, and I'm thinking more too about more of like the lay trans person, the mostly people in the audience that are listening, kind of like you have this idea of surviving the Trump era. And don't get me twisted. I think you made a good point there. I'm just wondering, like, more on the lay side of how does how else, I guess, would you guys be affected personally, um, and specifically?
I think it's really important before we move on from that point to point out that the US military is the number one employer of trans people in this country. So we are talking not only about weakening our national defense, but you're also
Mhm.
talking about a lot of people being out of a job, which is going to have
Mm.
negative
Yeah, well, I
effects
didn't
on
know
the
that.
economy. So, I mean, I mean, it's difficult to say exactly what's going to pass or like what they're going to push
Yeah.
through on the executive versus, you know, do they actually have they don't have the Senate majority that they need to push things through in the Senate. Remains to be seen what's going to happen
Hmm.
in the House. So we can look at what their stated intention is. Their stated intentions are that, well, first of all, they are going to attack abortion rights and birth control access, which is something that affects me as a trans person who can get pregnant. We also have the stated intent to make pornography illegal and punishable by jail time, and the association of trans people with pornography. That's on page 5 of the Project 2025 manifesto or whatever you want to call it. So they certainly
Hmm.
intend to start criminalizing trans people as sexually deviant in a way that harms children. In Arkansas, there was a bill proposed that would make using the bathroom at the same time as a child, if you're trans, the equivalent crime to actually physically, sexually harming a child. So it's not like a slippery slope to say that they will try to push through things that are basically going to make being trans like a crime of sexual deviancy equivalent to physically harming a child, and that they will attempt to get this into jail time. Like, I don't really think we're going to see camps and like that kind of. We're more likely to see the camp situation happen for the attempted deportation of like millions of people in this country. But for trans people,
Mhm.
the thing that's most likely to happen if they manage to go down this route is like it becomes a crime and people in red states start being more actively persecuted. So like that is just based on their stated intent. We don't know how much they're going to be able to actually push through. There is a likelihood that they will revoke the ability for trans people to select the correct gender on their passport, which creating documentation issues means that it's going to be harder to emigrate out of this country. Um, it presents issues for finding housing and employment if your documentation is. Or actually, I've seen some trans people applying for passports and have that extremely delayed. Like they don't get their passport back until it's been 3 months instead of the typical 4 to 6 weeks, which obviously presents issues if you are trying to do anything that requires that documentation. So, yeah, I mean, it seems pretty open ended at this time.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what are your thoughts, Matthew?
Yeah, going back to the military, I think there definitely needs to be a nuanced conversation that probably both sides will probably not be happy at the end of that one. I do see the concern in that, and I'm not necessarily for just like nixing trans people out of the military because they're trans or whatever. So yeah, that could be tough. But
I don't know
these
if it's
themes,
Matthew. I question your thoughts on how that would be a nuanced conversation from both sides. I
Or
don't know
how
if
it would
you're
be
aware
difficult?
of. I don't know if you're aware of any of that
if we can
issue.
swing back,
So
if we can swing back
no,
around to
no,
it,
you
maybe. But
mentioned it. I want to hear your thoughts. No, you said it. I wanna hear where you're going with it.
well, my thought process is when it comes to just kicking somebody out because they're trans, I would say the thing would be they would have to just do the things that are appropriate to their gender that they were assigned at birth, or the gender that they were born to at birth. I know that's the language of gender assigned at birth. You're not assigned a gender; you're born with the not gender but sex at birth. So the sex that they were at birth, they would have to conform to that, and they can stay in the military if they're willing to do that. I think
No,
that
and
would be
that
the
and that probably is
conversation.
what is going to happen. No, that probably is what is going to
Yeah.
happen. I don't know if you understand
Hmm.
how problematic that is.
Can you explain why that would be problematic?
Well, it's going to end up having people who have undergone transition, they're just by default going to get kicked out because if you have somebody who has like physical changes such as breast tissue
Hmm.
development,
Yeah,
changes
yeah,
like that are irreversible, they are not going to be able to be uh, coherent with their sex assigned at birth. It is going to forcibly out them. So you're going to know who's trans and who isn't, and
right.
that like basically will end up like causing increases in uh, like violence and sexual assaults in the military. Which I don't know if you're aware how bad that is in the military. It's really bad.
I
Um,
can only imagine,
so we're
and probably not
increasing the
even.
likelihood of that violence and essentially, even though it's not in name kicking people out, effectively disproportionately trans women would end up being kicked out because they wouldn't be able to conform with what their biological sex is based on certain
Yeah,
physical changes.
it's a messy situation
So
from my point of view, and it seems like it's.
I honestly,
I think
Matthew,
the
I don't give a
direction.
shit, and I don't know if you understand how little of a shit I give about your point of view on this issue. Are you in the military? Have you ever served in the military?
Yes,
Okay, how
I'm a veteran,
what branch?
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps. Okay. Um but so you say that you wouldn't be in favor of people just getting kicked out because they're trans, but that effectively, even though it's not specifically what they're saying would happen, that effectively would happen.
Yeah, no,
Because the
like I said,
one the one
I know you
like
don't care about my opinion, so I'll
lead
move on
to
from that
that
subject unless you
happening.
want to hear my opinion.
Yeah, give me your
You seem like you
opinion.
don't want.
How am I wrong on it?
No, well, I just like I said, I think it's a. I don't think you're wrong. I think it's just a messy situation from my point of view, and I think moving forward, like I said, neither party will probably be happy. If I was king for a day, like I said, if I was king for a day, neither party would probably be happy. And from the whole canopy of transness, I think it's just let's just back up and let's just go back to uh, male, female, and because without that being there, if this trans stuff
Absolutely
didn't
not.
exist in the
Absolutely,
first place, we wouldn't
Matthew.
have that problem.
Again, back to, do you know how, like, you're in that case, you're just going to have no trans people in the military. And again, even if you
Yeah,
take away
yeah, that'd be,
the humanity of trans people being an issue here, if you just focus on the fighting force in the military, you're decreasing your fighting force in a time where recruitment is at like an all-time low in the military, right?
yeah. And I'm only taking your word
So
for it,
so
and I believe what you're saying. So,
so
like I
Matthew, it's
said,
not that it's,
yeah,
you're
but
saying it's a sticky issue. It's not a sticky issue at all of saying trans people can serve. And where there are some medical sticking points, like, those are things that are already acknowledged by trans people. The fact where if you are taking it, but it's not on the basis of being trans, it's on the basis of utilizing a medication that requires a needle while you're on deployment. Like, if you can't deploy if you have injectable medication, like that's reasonable. That's something where you can say, okay, you need to be stable on like a topical testosterone, or you need to be like on an oral estrogen or some other option before you can do X job. That's reasonable because that's not singling out trans people. That is saying this is a medical requirement for safety reasons and for logistics reasons. You could then have trans people working other jobs if that's an issue for them. Um, but to say that it would be better to just go back to male and female having these very strict gender roles, I, I I don't know if you know how, like, not only from a trans standpoint, but just from a gender role standpoint, that sounds backwards in a lot of ways. Um,
that's what I'm
Maybe that
saying.
would
We
be a
probably have to
conversation
move
for a different
backwards.
time to get to your
Yeah.
thoughts on women in the military. Um, but there are a lot of issues. Like, I think that it's not too much of an ask to say let trans people serve in the military, and it's not as sticky as you think it is from that standpoint.
I think it's a bigger issue too from the military as well. I think taking a bigger step back, we need to encourage people to go into the military again. When I was joining and serving, it was very like a proud thing to join the military. Nowadays, it's
How
not.
do you think we would increase the amount of people in the military if you decide to kick people out that you don't like, or to not allow them in?
Well,
Right?
I think there'll
Isn't
be
that
I
silly?
think there'll be some many men and women who would feel comfortable if there were no trans people in the military. They'd be like, sure, I'll join. And I'm sure there are some people that are like, the reason why I'm not joining up is because they're messing around with all this trans stuff. Like
But there
what are
are
we
also
doing? We're
like
the United States military.
yeah, I could also make the argument though, Matthew, that there are a lot of pro LGBTQ people who would also feel alienated from the military for them taking a hardline stance against trans people. Like if you go this direction, you're not only boxing out
Mhm.
the trans people, you're also boxing out anybody who wants to support progressive legislation and like everybody who cares about trans people having jobs. Like again, lots of trans people employed in the military. And we're not just talking about like people who are new. We're talking about people who are careers who have been in for 30 and 40 years who are like deeply ingrained in their positions and very valuable to their department. Like so like yeah, I guess you would have to poll the US population and figure out who's in support of what. But it kind of seems like there's fewer and fewer people who
Yeah.
are anti-trans enough that they would just refuse to enlist. So
And
I don't
Well,
know.
no,
again, going
That's
back
all very
actually,
to,
you make an
again,
you make an important point.
and
You make an important
Matthew,
point.
again,
Pardon?
again though, going back to the like medical issue with physicians in the military,
Mhm.
there's a distinct cultural difference in people that have graduate degrees and professional degrees in the military and those that don't. A lot of the more
Mhm.
conservative, like, anti-LGBT culture are on in those areas with less educated people. If
Mhm.
you end up going this route, the people that are not going to join up are your doctors, your engineers, the people that are going to help multiply your force. And so it's interesting that you kind of take that route. And I'm going to say this too: the Marine Corps doesn't even have their own doctors; they rely on Navy doctors.
Yes, that is true.
Um,
That is very true. Um,
it's
but
there
when I was serving, there
there
wasn't
are
an
reasons
overwhelming amount of.
to be more well, and the leadership across military medicine is
Mhm.
primarily in favor of LGBTQ rights and keeping us in the military. So um, you just be overall decreasing your force and decreasing some very key components of your force.
Right. So I'm taking a lot of things that you say as facts. I don't have the information in front of me, but when I know when I was in the military, there wasn't an overwhelming amount of trans officers and gay or trans corpsmen. You know,
Do you know
and
why?
so
Hold on, Matthew. Think about this for a second. Do you remember "Don't Ask, Don't Tell"? Do you think
yes,
people
and
who were when I was
do you think leaving,
people who were
they were
LGBTQ
they were
were open?
yeah, they
No. Do
were
you
feeling
think
that.
that they were like it was acceptable to be open about it? I doubt that there weren't any of those people. I think that they were not allowed to be open, or that even at points where like there wasn't "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," there's still social pressure to stay quiet because still high levels of harassment, still having implications like with like the people you work with. So
Now you got me questioning my officers. I will say this. Um, you bring up don't ask, don't tell. I think don't ask, don't tell probably should come back. But
why,
and
Matthew? Why?
because
What's your reason?
we don't need to know. We don't need to know. I don't need to know. I don't care. Especially if I'm in the military and I'm serving.
Okay, cool.
I
So
don't want
Matthew,
to
So
know.
hold
I
on.
don't need to know, and
I
I
need to
don't
cut in
care.
here. Hold on. I need to cut in here.
Mhm.
It's not
Okay.
like, okay, so this is the exact same thing that we run into when we're having this conversation about don't say gay in schools or whatever. We're not talking about
Mhm.
teachers or service members coming in and talking about their sexual escapades for the weekend. We're talking about people who are married, talking about their spouses saying, "Hey, I went on
Mhm.
vacation with my husband. My husband and I are about to adopt a kid." Like, that's what don't ask, don't tell is. It's like you have to not speak at all about any aspect of your private life, which, like, I don't think that that's a
Mhm.
reasonable request for anybody, especially if for in the military, if you're like serving for an extended period of time, to just be like, yeah, I can't talk to anyone about I'm writing a letter home to my same-sex partner, but I can't talk to any of my fellow service members about it because I could be dishonorably discharged from the military, lose my job, lose my benefits. Like, it's kind of insane to me that you live in the year of our Lord 2024 and you think that fucking don't ask, don't tell needs to come back. Any respect that I
Well,
have
I
for
think a
you
lot of
is
things.
rapidly diminishing, my bro.
yeah, Matthew, this is
Well,
exactly that was exactly what I was getting into. I was like, okay, like if you
mhm.
think that you don't need to be talking about this stuff, like, okay, let's extend that rule then to
To
cis
everybody.
het people. Like, yeah, so
Please,
Matthew, if
yes,
you were in
yes.
service,
I don't care what
you
you do with
can't
your
talk
wife.
about
I don't
you
care what
can't
you do with your husband.
no, but
Yes,
Matthew,
let's do it.
do you think that if a service member was getting married, if a like assigned male at birth cis man was getting married to a cis woman, do you think they should be allowed to share an announcement like, "Hey, I'm getting married," or like they should be able to
If it's
tell
going to
their
affect
friends
our
they're getting married?
military in the way that you're, if it's going to affect our
Matthew,
military in the
no,
way
answer
that
the
you're
fucking
saying,
question. If you
I will
Matthew, do you
accept
understand?
the
Matthew, do you
sacrifice.
understand that people live in the barracks
But,
together? And like those people
yeah.
are effectively your family, right? So do you think that that person should be able to tell the person that he rooms with that he's getting married?
No, I mean, I don't care. I don't care if you get married.
Okay, so
Is
you
okay.
I don't care
think
where
that
we
it's
get married.
reasonable for people to be able to talk to their barracks mates about their personal lives to some extent, but you think that they should be allowed to be dishonorably discharged if they happen to be in a same-sex couple. Is that, I want to know if that's what you're saying.
We can turn some pages back and on don't ask, don't tell. We can make an amendments. I think the paperwork is probably won't be
Matthew,
that hard.
you're not answering our questions. You're just saying the same thing
No, I
over
don't.
again.
I don't think that they should be
No, Matthew, we're
dishonorably
pointing out.
discharged.
Okay, but you think so? What is the point of bringing up "Don't Ask, Don't Tell"? The whole premise was that if anybody knows that you're gay, you get kicked out of the military. Like,
From
that's
your
the
point of view,
premise.
that is the whole premise. From my point of view, is we don't care.
It's not. We don't
That's
care.
not what happened.
That's
If
not
they
what the
didn't care, they
policy
wouldn't pass
is.
a rule about it. They wouldn't pass a rule about it if they didn't care, right?
All right. So now we can amend the rule. We can change. We don't. It doesn't have to be the same rule. It doesn't have to be the same exact rule, right?
But that's what don't ask, don't tell is. If you want to bring back don't ask, don't tell, you are bringing back the policy of dishonorably discharging gay and trans members of the military unless they keep it completely private and under wraps and make sure nobody finds out.
And as I said, I'd be willing to, like I said, let's just say
So
I had some type of
which
poll.
part do you want to bring back? Which part do you want to bring back?
The mostly the part that talks about not asking and not telling. Like, I don't need to ask you whether you're trans or whatever, and you don't need to
But
tell
what's
me
the
that you're trans
consequence
or
for that?
whatever.
Like, do you want there to be a consequence for that? Do you want them to be honorably discharged? Is that the distinction that you're drawing? Like, you want to make it policy that people in the military can't talk about their same-sex spouses or children. They can't be like, "Wow, I'm so looking forward to seeing my husband when I get home." Like, what do you want out of that? What is the point of this?
I mean, probably I wouldn't say a discharge, maybe a rip, not for being trans or whatever, but for disclosing. All right, we told you don't ask, or for asking. Someone will get a rip for asking, you know.
Okay.
Okay,
So
And
you
so
want
so
to
it was
Matthew,
punish you
so
want
you
to
admit
punish
that you,
LGBTQ service members
yep,
for
that is
asking
what you
or
are
for telling.
saying.
Was that?
for
Yeah, that is what
existing.
you were saying that if you, yeah, so you want to punish LGBTQ service members.
Or straight service members who ask, or LGBT service members who ask.
But you
How does
don't
that?
care.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
that doesn't punish the straight people, right? Do you not see how that only punishes the
You know how many
LGBTQ
straight
people?
people ask in the military if somebody's gay or not when they suspect that someone's gay?
So, but the
Yeah, but
question
do you
is,
understand? Yeah,
if straight service
yeah.
members are talking about their family and their kids, you think that that's okay
Hmm.
and they shouldn't be punished for it. Is that correct?
Like I said,
I would
I,
like you to answer the
if we
question
have
directly. You are
no,
saying that
I'm answering. I'm answering it.
you want
It,
there to be a formal punishment for gay men talking about their husbands, or if a straight person asks a
it's a
gay person about his husband, but you don't think that there should be a punishment, official write-up or something for straight service members talking about their spouses?
there. There would have to be. There would have to be. I wouldn't necessarily want that, but like I said, not everyone's going to be happy. There would have to be if we're going to play fair.
Then
We're
why
going to
have
play
that at
fair
all?
and keep our
Why have
military.
that rule at all, Matthew?
What's the
Matthew,
point of
I
this?
want to
Pardon?
ask you a question. Like what is going on in your head that makes you think you need to think about policy in this way? Like
You
I
asked me about
genuinely
my
have
opinion
no
on it. I asked if you
idea.
didn't want to
I
hear
have
it. You said you
no
didn't want to hear it. You said
idea.
you wanted to hear it.
Matthew, I'm curious about why LGBTQ people live so rent free in your head. I'm so
They,
I
they
confused.
really
actually,
don't, honestly.
Because
I
if you wanted to mind your own business, if your whole thing was mind your own business, like, why are you so passionate about putting up so many barriers for people that are different than you? It does not make sense to me.
All I'm asking is how will it affect you? Because I'm hearing it a lot that it will affect you. You guys have a title
yeah.
saying
So
we're in the Trump era, how to survive that.
so
So
we have
how
told
will it
you
affect you?
we have told
Hmm.
you some of the ways in which it will affect us, including being
And we're still in the
like,
military. I wanted to touch on some
yeah,
other things.
because basically your response to us saying that we will be kicked out of our jobs in the military is to say that's reasonable. Like, that's kind of what you're saying, is that it's reasonable for trans people to lose their jobs and be kicked out of the military, even though that would weaken our country's ability to defend itself on numerous levels. So
I
basically,
thought
like,
I said it was a difficult conversation. I did not say it was reasonable. I don't think it's
yeah, but
reasonable.
you're
So
saying
that's
that
not
your
what I said.
solution to this problem would be to bring back a version of don't ask, don't tell, where there is like some formal reprimand for being out in the military as a queer person. So I'm actually going to dial this back a little
No,
bit. I know
no,
our
no,
callers can
no.
get,
For
hold on,
asking,
no. I'm moving on, Matthew. I'm moving on. This might be the last time
please.
we take your calls because I want to touch back on a discussion that you and I had the last time you called in when I was on the show. You brought up OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
asked me if it was a reasonable thing to expect that every grocery store you walk into provide um, hand sanitizer and wipes and stuff because that would be accommodating your mental illness, which you view transness as a
Right.
mental illness. You remember that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Degenerative
I've
dysphoria, but
actually,
okay.
whatever, I have had a conversation with a couple people actually about OCD, and I wanted to just point out really quickly that and you said that you were diagnosed with OCD, so I'm assuming that you should know this. And I find it kind of surprising that you took the view that you did based on the fact that you should know this if you've been treated for OCD. But reinforcing your OCD by capitulating to the compulsion worsens your condition, does it not?
True. Yes.
Yeah, so that's not the case with trans people. Trans people don't like, it's not like you affirm our genders and then we have to go seeking someone else to affirm our genders and it like makes us feel worse. When we start to be affirmed,
That's
we
exactly what
feel
happens.
better.
When more people affirm your
No,
gender and someone doesn't, there's a problem.
No,
okay, so but it doesn't like make our distress continue to escalate when we're being affirmed. You understand the difference? Like, so if I were to say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry,
In the
Matthew,
long run, it
let me
will.
hand sanitize my hands," that will make you
Hmm.
worse in an immediate sense. There is no evidence that when you affirm trans people's gender, our distress related to our gender gets worse. I would say, in fact, that
When you
if you're being antagonized constantly about your gender, that's when it feels the worst. But when people start accepting you, you start to feel better and you are less distressed. That's the objective measurement that we have taken. That's why treatment, the most effective treatment, is to transition because it basically eliminates most of that distress if you're operating in your daily life and people just treat you as the gender that you want to be treated as. So I think that you
not at all
fundamentally
because
don't understand that. Or you're just going to
not at all
disagree with
because
the last 50
now,
years of research?
well, let me explain. Now we're at a problem. Now we're at a huge problem where people are saying, "Hey, look, we don't accept this idea. We don't accept this," and now there's a fear of being kicked out of the military. There's a fear of, I guess,
Right, but
trans lives under a Trump
comparing these
era.
two issues, Matthew, it would be like if
Mhm.
I refuse to do hand sanitizer before I shake your hand, uh, that would make you feel worse, right? That's the analogous situation. If I'm trans and I'm being, if people are declining to accommodate me, that makes my condition worse. But if we decline to accommodate OCD, that actually is part of the treatment to help you get better. So you fundamentally don't understand gender dysphoria. I also want to point out that in the chat, people have asked before why you seem so obsessed with trans people. It's something that commonly comes up, and I'm hitting on this because Ben just brought it up. It seems, Matthew, honestly, as though your
This is a
OCD
trans call-in
has
show.
some. Hold on, ha, ba, 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 ba. You have some kind of obsessive problem with trans people, and calling into us is reinforcing your anxiety. You told me
I think
before
you're
that when
mistaken.
you
This is
call
a
in,
trans
hold
call-in
on,
show. This
Matthew,
is
shut up. You have told me before that every time you call into us, you leave the conversation more reinforced in your beliefs. I believe truly that you calling into our show is an unhealthy reinforcement of some kind of obsessive belief or some kind of obsessive nonsense that you have with trans
that
people.
sounds like an ad
I think
hominem.
that you I think that you need to talk to your therapist about why you cannot stop thinking about trans people and figure out where the source of that anxiety is coming from because us taking your calls is making you a worse person and it is worsening your anxiety on this issue. So thank you very much for calling in. We have appreciated all of your time. I don't think we're going to take your calls again. Appreciate you.
Dumb motherfucker has called the Hang Up,
Yeah.
Dude Gum, and the Sunday Show talking about trans people. He has not exclusively called this show. He's genuinely obsessed. I hope his wife goes through his phone, probably watching tons of
Yeah.
trans porn.
So I'm done with him. I know that all of you in the chat are very frustrated with the fact that we keep taking Matthew's calls. We have found him to be good cannon fodder for us to break down those arguments, but I genuinely believe everything I just said. I think that he has an obsessive issue with trans people. He has said that he has OCD. I don't think that it's healthy for us to keep taking his calls. I don't think it's healthy for him to continue calling in here. If he wants to call one of the other shows, whatever, but I'm not interested in speaking to him anymore. I think we're all kind of over it. So thank you,
Agreed.
everybody, for your patience on that.
Hey, if you liked this video, why don't you click that like button?
And if you didn't
That's
like
what
it,
you would say.
subscribe.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't give me a chance.
There was such a long pause.
What are you on speed or
All right, let's try
something? I barely had a
Let's
chance.
try again. Hey, I hope you liked. Hey, I hope you. Fuck. Hey there. I hope you liked that clip. Hey, I hope you liked that clipper just now, the one that you just watched with your eyes. If you did like it, why don't you click that like button?
And if you didn't like it, tell Jimmy to go fuck himself.
Hey, I hope you liked that clip right now. If you did like it, why don't you hit that like button?
And if you didn't like it, go ahead and subscribe anyway.